The stars did not move. Not really. But on the bridge of the scout ship Varen, it felt like they were sliding backward, like the whole galaxy was running away from something. Captain Aile Soren stood at the front window and watched the dark. Her hands were folded behind her back. Her crew called this her thinking pose. Right now, she was not thinking about anything calm. "Report," she said. A young officer named Dries looked up from his screen. His 4 fingers were shaking slightly on the controls. He was young, still learning, still scared of things he should not be scared of. But this time, his fear made sense. "Captain, we are 12 minutes from the outer marker," Dries said. "After that, we enter the system." "The Class 15 system," said another voice. This one belonged to Naya, the ship's science officer. She did not sound scared. She sounded curious, which was almost worse. Nobody on the bridge said anything for a moment. Everyone knew what a Class 15 world meant. In the Galactic Registry, worlds were graded by danger. Class 1 was safe, like a garden. Class 5 was rough, but livable with basic gear. Class 10 was for trained survival teams only, with heavy armor and weapons. Class 15 did not have survivors. Ever. Every species that sent a team to a Class 15 world lost that team. Every single time. Some ships never even reported back. Some sent one broken transmission, full of screaming, before going silent forever. Over the last 300 years, only 9 Class 15 worlds had ever been found in the galaxy. All 9 were marked the same way in every star chart. Do not land. No life can survive here. And now the Varen was flying straight toward the 10th one. Captain Soren turned from the window. "Naya, tell me again why we are doing this." Naya smiled, which did not help anyone relax. "Because 3 weeks ago, a deep space listening post caught a strange signal coming from that system. A structured signal. Repeating, not random noise." "A structured signal," Soren repeated. "From a world where nothing survives." "Exactly," Naya said. "That is why Command sent us. Not a war fleet, not a mining team, just us. A small scout ship. To look. Only to look." Soren did not like it. She had commanded the Varen for 6 years. She had faced pirates, ice storms on frozen moons, and one very angry alien trade ambassador who threw a chair at her. She was not new to danger, but this felt different. This felt like flying toward a door that everyone else in history had been too smart to open. 10 minutes to the marker," Dries said. Soren took a breath. "Take us in slow. Full sensors. If anything looks wrong, we turn around. Understood?" "Understood, Captain," the crew said together. The Varen crossed the outer marker at exactly the 10-minute mark. Nothing happened. No alarms. No attack. No monster ship waiting in the dark to eat them. For a moment, the bridge crew almost laughed with relief. Almost. Then the system came into view. The star at the center was a strange orange-red color, older than most stars this bright. Around it circled 6 planets. 5 of them were clearly dead, burned rock, poison gas, or frozen ice balls with no atmosphere at all. The 6th planet was different. It hung in space like a jewel, blue and green and brown, wrapped in thick white clouds. From far away, it looked beautiful, almost peaceful. "That's it?" Naya said quietly. "That's the Class 15 world." Soren stared at the screen. "It's pretty." "So is a spider," Naya said, "right before it bites you." Dries pulled up the old survey data on his screen. The last real information anyone had about this planet, recorded almost 200 years ago by a probe that got close enough to scan the surface before its signal died forever. The readings were horrifying. Gravity was nearly double standard. The air was breathable, technically, but filled with airborne spores that could poison most known species within hours. Storms crossed entire continents in a single day, throwing lightning bolts strong enough to melt starship hulls. And the wildlife scans, the ones the probe managed to send before it went silent, showed creatures larger than any predator recorded anywhere else in the galaxy. One image, badly damaged and half corrupted, showed something with teeth as long as a grown man was tall. "This is a death world," Driss whispered. A real one, not just on paper. Then explain the signal, Soren said. Naya, put it on speakers. Naya tapped her console. A sound filled the bridge, not random static, not natural noise. It was rhythmic, structured, almost like a heartbeat or a code. Beep, 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 beep. It repeated in a steady pattern over and over, like someone, or something, had been sending it for a very long time. That is not natural, Naya said. Nature does not repeat like that. Someone made this signal. Soren's jaw tightened. Someone or something that is still alive down there, on a world where nothing survives. The bridge went quiet again. They spent the next hour in careful orbit, scanning the planet from a safe distance. Slowly, a picture began to form. Most of the surface was covered in thick, dark green jungle, broken by huge mountain ranges and wide rivers that moved too fast for any normal current. Storm systems the size of small countries rolled across the land, one after another, never stopping. But near the northern pole, in a valley surrounded by tall cliffs, the sensors picked up something strange. A shape. Long. Metallic. Half buried in dirt and plant growth, like it had been there for a very long time. Naya, magnify that, Soren said. The image grew larger on the main screen. Slowly, the outline became clear. It was a ship. Not a small one either. This was enormous, easily 10 times the size of the Veyron. Its hull was a strange design, curved and layered in a way none of them recognized. Half of it was buried under jungle growth. Vines and thick roots wrapped around the metal like the planet itself was trying to swallow it whole. Driss leaned forward, eyes wide. That's not one of ours. That's not any design in the registry. Naya ran the shape through the ship's database. Every known species ship design flashed by on her screen. None of them matched. It's not in our records, she said slowly, not even close. Whoever built that ship, we have never met them before. Soren felt something cold settle in her chest. An unknown species. A ship larger than anything in her fleet. Buried on a planet that had killed every single team ever sent to study it. And a repeating signal, still broadcasting, after who knew how many years. Could that ship be sending the signal? Soren asked. Naya checked the data again. The signal source lines up almost perfectly with the ship's location. Captain, I think that ship is still transmitting. After all this time, that means it still has power, Driss said. Something down there is keeping it alive. The bridge crew looked at each other. Nobody needed to say what they were all thinking. A ship that big still running, on a planet where nothing survives. This was either the greatest discovery of the century, or the most dangerous mistake they were about to make. Captain Soren made her decision the way she made every hard decision. Carefully, and with a clear head. We are not landing the Veyron, she said. That's final. But we will send a small scout team to the surface, in a shielded lander, straight to that ship, in and out. No unnecessary risks. Captain, Driss said nervously. With respect, every team ever sent to a Class 15 world has died. Everyone. I know the history, Driss, Soren said. Her voice was steady, but her eyes stayed on the buried ship on the screen. But no team has ever had a target like this before. We are not exploring blindly. We are going straight to a fixed point, gathering data and leaving. 2 hours on the surface, no more. Naya nodded slowly. I want to be on that team. I assumed you would, Soren said. You'll lead the science side. Driss, you're on the lander crew too. I want your engineering eyes on that ship's systems. Driss swallowed hard, but he nodded. Fear did not mean he would refuse an order. The lander was small, built for short, fast trips through dangerous atmospheres. Its hull was reinforced triple thick, designed for storms and heavy impacts. 4 crew members climbed aboard. Naya, Driss, a pilot named Korim, and a security officer named Vek, who carried more weapons than the rest of the team combined. As the lander detached from the Veyron and began its descent, Soren watched from the bridge, her hands gripping the edge of her console tighter than she meant to. Stay in contact every 60 seconds, she said through the comms. If contact breaks for longer than that, I am pulling you out immediately, mission or no mission. Understood, Captain. Naya's voice crackled back. The lander dropped through the thick white clouds. Almost immediately the ride turned rough. Lightning flashed on every side, close enough that the crew could feel the static crawl across their skin. Wind slammed the small ship sideways, and Coram fought the controls with both hands, sweat forming on his brow despite the climate control. This is worse than the readings said, Coram shouted over the noise. Keep us steady, Naya called back, gripping her seat. Below them, through breaks in the storm clouds, the jungle came into view. Endless, dark green, and moving. Not from wind, from something underneath it. Massive shapes shifted beneath the tree canopy, too large and too fast to be anything friendly. Driss stared out the small window, his face pale. Something down there is huge, he whispered. Really huge. Eyes forward, Vex said calmly, checking his weapon one more time. We land, we scan, we leave. The lander broke through the last layer of clouds and the valley came into full view. The buried ship sat below them, massive and ancient, its metal hull streaked with rust and wrapped in thick jungle growth. Even half buried, it looked powerful, like a sleeping giant that the planet had tried and failed to fully swallow. There it is, Naya breathed. Coram guided the lander down carefully, choosing a clear patch of ground near the ship's exposed hull. The landing was rough. The ground shook slightly under the heavy gravity, but the lander held steady. We are down, Coram announced. All systems stable. Soren's voice came through the comms immediately. Confirmed. You have 2 hours. Stay sharp. The moment the lander's hatch opened, the smell hit them first. Thick, wet, and strange, like rain mixed with something rotting far away. The air was heavy, almost too thick to breathe comfortably, even through their filtered masks. Vex stepped out first, weapon raised, scanning the tree line. Driss followed, then Naya, then Coram, who stayed close to the lander's controls in case they needed a fast exit. The jungle around them was alive with sound. Deep calls in the distance, rustling in the canopy above, the constant patter of falling water from leaves far overhead. Every sound made Driss flinch. Stay close together, Naya said. We move to the ship, we scan, we do not wander. They crossed the short distance to the massive hull. Up close, the ship was even more impressive, and stranger. The metal was a dark gray-blue color, unlike anything in known engineering. Long grooves ran across its surface in patterns that almost looked like writing, though none of them could read it. Naya pulled out a hand scanner and pressed it against the hull. Power signature confirmed. It's still active. Whatever built this ship made it to last. Driss ran his fingers along one of the strange grooves. This design, it's beautiful. Whoever made this, they were skilled. Really skilled. Focus, Vex said, still watching the tree line. Admire it later. They moved along the hull until they found what looked like an entrance. A large panel, partly open, as if something had forced it open long ago and never closed it again. Thick vines curled through the gap, and dim green light glowed faintly from somewhere deep inside. Naya's eyes widened. There's still power inside, a lot of it. Should we go in? Driss asked, his voice tight. Naya looked at the opening for a long moment. Every instinct told her this was the biggest discovery of her career. Every piece of training told her this was exactly the kind of decision that got scout teams killed. Captain, she said into the comms, we found an open entrance, requesting permission to enter for a short internal scan. There was a pause. Then Soren's voice, careful and firm. Permission granted. 15 minutes inside, no more. Report everything you see. Naya nodded to her team. 15 minutes. Let's move. Inside, the ship was dark, lit only by strange pulses of dim green light along the walls, like the vessel was breathing on its own. The air inside was different from outside. Drier, cooler, almost untouched by the jungle beyond the hull. The corridor stretched ahead of them, wide and tall, built for something larger than any of them. Strange markings covered the walls, more of that unreadable writing. "This place is old," Naya whispered, her scanner sweeping side to side. "Really old. But someone has kept parts of it running. This isn't just leftover power. Someone maintained this." Driss knelt beside a panel on the wall, brushing away a thin layer of dust. Underneath, the metal was clean, recently touched. "Naya, someone was here, recently. Look at this." Naya crouched beside him, running her scanner over the clean patch. "You're right. This has been touched within the last few months, maybe less." Vec's grip tightened on his weapon. "Then whoever survives on this planet, they've been inside this ship, recently." The team moved deeper, following the dim green light down the long corridor. They found rooms filled with strange equipment, some clearly alien in design, some oddly familiar despite being unlike anything built by any known species. Storage containers lined one wall, most broken open and empty, as if someone had taken supplies from them, piece by piece, over a very long time. In one room, they found something that made all four of them stop completely, a small fire pit, cold but recently used. Around it, simple tools are carved from bone and metal, clearly handmade, clearly not part of the ship's original equipment. "Someone is living here," Naya said quietly, "inside this ship." Driss picked up one of the carved tools carefully. "This isn't alien craftsmanship. Look at the shape. This looks almost human." The word hung in the air. Nobody on the team had ever encountered humans before. Most species in this part of the galaxy knew of them only through old trade records and rumors. A relatively young species from a distant, unremarkable system, known mostly for being stubborn, loud, and surprisingly hard to kill in wars nobody expected them to win. "That's impossible," Vec said. "Humans don't have colonies out this far. Nobody does. This system isn't even mapped properly." "I'm not saying it is human," Driss said carefully, setting the tool back down. "I'm saying it looks like something a human might make, with their hands, without proper tools." Naya's scanner beeped sharply. She looked down at the readout, her face going pale. "Naya?" Vec asked. "What is it?" "Biological signature," she said slowly. "Close. Very close. And it's moving toward us." The team froze. For a long moment, nobody moved. The only sound was the faint hum of the ship's ancient systems and the soft, steady beep of Naya's scanner, tracking something coming closer through the corridors. "Command," Naya said into her comms, keeping her voice as steady as she could. "We have a biological contact inside the ship. Repeat, a life form is inside the vessel with us." Static crackled, then Soren's voice came through, tense and sharp. "Get out of there, now. That is an order." "Copy that," Vec said, already moving the team back toward the entrance, weapon raised, eyes scanning every shadow. They moved quickly through the dim corridor, retracing their steps toward the open hull panel where they had entered. The green light pulsed faster now, almost like the ship itself sensed something was happening. Then Naya's scanner beeped again, closer this time, much closer. "It's right around the next corner," she whispered. Vec raised a hand, signaling the team to stop. He pressed himself against the wall near the corridor's bend, weapon ready, breathing controlled and steady despite the fear in his eyes. Driss grabbed Naya's arm, pulling her back a step. "Careful," he mouthed. For a moment, everything was silent. Then slowly, footsteps echoed from around the corner. Not the heavy, dragging steps of some jungle predator. Not the skittering of insects or the slither of something reptilian. These were footsteps. 2 feet. Walking carefully, deliberately, like something that knew exactly where it was going. The team held their breath. A shadow moved across the wall ahead of them, cast by the dim green light. It was tall, upright, 2 arms, 2 legs, a single head, humanoid in shape. Vec's finger tightened slightly on his weapon's trigger, but he did not fire. Not yet. The shadow paused at the edge of the corridor bend, as if it too had sensed something was wrong. Then a voice spoke, rough, low. clearly exhausted, but unmistakably intelligent. And it spoke in words, actual words, not in any galactic trade language any of them recognized. It sounded almost like an old, forgotten human dialect. "Who's there?" Naya's scanner slipped slightly from her shaking hand. Vec stepped forward, weapon lowering just slightly, his voice steady despite his racing heart. "Show yourself." Slowly. For a long, tense moment, nothing happened. Then, slowly, a figure stepped around the corner into the dim green light. It was not a monster. It was not some unknown alien predator hunting them through the dark corridors of a dead ship. It was a person, weathered, scarred, dressed in patched, hand-sewn clothing made from strange jungle materials, carrying a crude spear made from metal scrap and bone. A human, standing very much alive on a Class 15 death world, inside a ship that should not have working power, in a system that had never been mapped. The stranger's eyes narrowed as they looked over the alien scout team, taking in every detail with the calm, careful awareness of someone who had survived far worse than a group of strangers with weapons. Then in a rough voice, cracked from disuse but clear enough to understand, the figure spoke words that would change everything the alien scouts thought they knew about this planet, this ship, and this death world that had killed every other species that ever tried to claim it. "You shouldn't be here," the stranger said. "This place belongs to us now." Behind the stranger, deeper in the ship's shadows, more shapes began to move. More footsteps. More voices. Naya's scanner beeped again and again rapidly now, picking up not one, not two, but dozens of biological signatures. All human, all alive, all moving toward them from deeper within the ancient vessel. Vec's eyes went wide. "Captain," he said into his comms, his voice barely steady. "You need to hear this." Outside, in orbit, Captain Soren gripped the edge of her console, staring at the live feed from her team's cameras, watching as more and more human figures emerged from the shadows of that ancient, buried ship. "There's not just one," she whispered to herself. "There's a whole colony down there. On a planet where nothing was supposed to survive. Humans had already been there, long before the aliens ever arrived. And they were not just surviving. They had made this death world their home." The green light in the corridor felt colder now. Vec stood with his weapon half raised, not pointing it, but not lowering it either. In front of him stood a man who should not exist. Behind that man, more shapes moved in the dark. More people, more humans, all watching the strangers who had just walked into their home. Nobody spoke for a long moment. Naya's scanner kept beeping, counting bodies. 12, 15, 18. The number kept climbing as more figures gathered in the shadows behind the first man. "Captain," Vec said quietly into his comms, keeping his eyes on the stranger in front of him. "We are surrounded. Repeat, we are surrounded by multiple human individuals. They do not appear to be attacking. Yet." In orbit, Soren's voice came back sharp and fast. "Do not engage, do not fire, try to communicate. I am watching the feed. Stay calm." Vec lowered his weapon slightly, though he did not put it away completely. He raised his free hand, palm open, the universal sign for peace across most known species. "We mean no harm," he said slowly, carefully. "We did not know anyone lived here." The man in front of him tilted his head slightly. His eyes moved over Vec's armor, over Naya's scanner, over Driss standing frozen near the wall. He did not look afraid. He looked tired, tired in a way that came from years, not days. "You speak trade common," the man said, switching languages smoothly, his accent strange and old-sounding, like something learned a long time ago and rarely used since. "Good. That will make this easier." Naya's mouth fell open slightly. "You know trade common?" "I knew it," the man said. "Once, a long time ago, before we crashed here." The man's name, they would soon learn, was Callum. He looked to be somewhere in his 50s, though the harsh life on this planet had aged him in ways that made guessing his real age difficult. His skin was leathery and sun-darkened, crossed with old scars. His clothes were a patchwork of jungle fiber, animal hide, and scraps of what looked like old ship material, sewn together with surprising skill. Behind him, more people slowly stepped into the dim light. Men, women, even a few children peeking out from behind the adults, all watching the alien visitors with careful, guarded eyes. Driss stared at them, his scanner hanging forgotten in his hand. There's dozens of them, he whispered. A whole community. 63. Callum said simply, as if reading the question on Driss's face. That is how many of us are left. We started with more. Naya stepped forward slowly, keeping her hands visible. My name is Naya. I am a science officer. We came here because we detected a signal. We did not expect this. Callum's eyes studied her carefully. The signal. Yes, we have kept it running for a long time, hoping anyone would hear it eventually. You built the signal? Naya asked, surprised. This ship, it's not human technology. It's something else entirely. Callum gave a small, tired smile. No, this ship is not ours. But we learned to use parts of it. Enough to keep a signal broadcasting. Enough to survive. Vec finally lowered his weapon completely, though every instinct told him to stay alert. Captain, he said into his comms, requesting permission to continue contact. These people do not appear hostile. There was a pause. Then Soren's voice returned, careful but firm. Permission granted. Learn everything you can. But watch yourselves. Callum gestured toward the deeper parts of the ship. Come, it is safer to talk somewhere with real light, and you look like you could use answers. The alien scout team exchanged glances. Naya nodded first, then Driss, then finally Vec, though his hand never strayed far from his weapon. They followed Callum and the group of humans deeper into the ship, through corridors that slowly transformed from ancient alien architecture into something that felt almost lived in. Blankets hung across doorways. Small fires burned in metal containers, filling certain rooms with warm, flickering light. Children's drawings, made with charcoal and colored plant dye, decorated some of the walls. Simple pictures of the jungle, of animals, of the stars above the clouds. It was, in a strange way, a home. A home built inside the bones of an ancient, abandoned starship, on a planet that was supposed to kill anything that landed on it. They reached a large open chamber deep within the ship. Once, it must have been some kind of gathering hall or cargo bay, but now it served as the heart of the human settlement. Dozens of people moved about, tending fires, sorting supplies, watching over children. The air smelled of smoke and cooked meat and something like dried herbs. Callum led the scout team to a raised platform near the chamber's center, where a few older humans sat waiting. One of them, a woman with silver-white hair and sharp, alert eyes, rose slowly to meet them. This is Mara, Callum said. She leads our people, has done so for almost 20 years now. Mara studied the alien visitors carefully, her gaze lingering on each of them in turn. You are the first outsiders to find us, she said. Her voice was calm, steady, used to commanding attention. In all our years here, no one has ever come. Naya bowed her head slightly, a gesture of respect she had learned worked well across many cultures. We did not expect to find anyone alive here. This world is marked as a death world. No species has ever survived contact with it before. Mara's lips curved into a small, humorless smile. We know. We were the first. And for a long time, we almost proved that mark true. Mara gestured for the team to sit, and slowly, carefully, the story began to unfold. Our ship, Mara said, was called the Providence, a colony vessel carrying settlers toward a new world, a green, safe world, thousands of light years from here. We were 3 years into the journey when something went wrong. An attack? Vec asked. Mara shook her head. A malfunction. A critical system failure deep in the ship's core. Our navigation systems failed. Our long-range communications died. And before the crew could fix the problem, we were pulled off course, drifting through unmapped space for months with no way to call for help. Driss leaned forward, listening intently. How did you end up here? On this planet? By accident, Mara said. Total terrible accident. Our ship's engines were failing, and this system was the closest place with a planet capable of sustaining an atmosphere. Our captain made the only choice she could. She brought us down here, hoping to survive long enough to repair the ship and continue on. But you never left, Naya said quietly. Mara's eyes grew distant, remembering. No, we never left. The ship was too badly damaged. And this planet made sure of the rest. Callum picked up the story from there, his voice growing heavier with old grief. The first year was the worst, he said. We lost so many people. The storms alone killed dozens before we learned how to build proper shelter. The wildlife. He paused, his jaw tightening. The wildlife here does not fear anything. It has never needed to. We were new prey to them. Easy prey at first. How many did you lose? Naya asked gently. We started with just over 200 people, Mara said. In the first 2 years alone, we lost more than half. The chamber went quiet. Even the children nearby seemed to sense the weight of the conversation, growing still and watchful. But you survived, Vex said. You're still here. 63 of you generations later. Mara nodded slowly. We survived because we had no other choice, and because humans, whatever else we are, do not give up easily. We learned. We adapted. We studied the storms, the predators, the plants. We made mistakes and we paid for them, but we learned from every single one. Driss, who had been quiet for a while, finally spoke up, his curiosity overpowering his caution. This ship, it's not human design. How did you end up living inside it? Callum's expression shifted slightly, something between respect and unease. This ship was already here when we crashed. Buried, much like it is now, though less overgrown back then. We found it during our first year, while searching for shelter from the storms. It was already abandoned? Naya asked, her scientific curiosity clearly overpowering her caution as well. Long abandoned, Mara said. Whatever species built it, they were gone long before we arrived. No bodies, no signs of a struggle, just empty, as if they left in a hurry or never came back from wherever they went. Naya's mind raced with questions. Do you know what species built it? Any records, any language samples? Callum shook his head. We never fully understood their language. Some of their systems still worked when we found it, though. Power systems, mostly. Enough for us to study, and eventually, enough for us to use safely, for light, for basic tools, and for the signal we've kept broadcasting for years. You didn't know if anyone would ever hear it, Vex said. We didn't, Mara admitted. But hope costs nothing. So we kept sending it year after year, in case someone, somewhere, was listening. Naya looked between Mara and Callum, an idea slowly clicking into place. The technology here, this ship's systems, they're advanced. Far more advanced than anything in our current registry. If you've been studying it for generations, we understand pieces of it, Callum said carefully. Enough to survive, not enough to leave. The core systems that would let this ship fly again are damaged beyond anything we can repair with what we have. But you understand the power systems, Naya pressed gently. The signal technology. That alone is remarkable. Mara studied Naya for a long moment, as if deciding how much to trust these strangers who had just walked into her people's home. We have learned much over the years. Necessity teaches quickly when the alternative is death. Vec, who had remained mostly quiet, finally spoke, his tone respectful but direct. You mentioned the wildlife here nearly killed you all in the early years. How did you survive it? This world is rated Class 15. Nothing survives its predators. A few of the older humans nearby exchanged glances, some grim, some almost proud. We learned to fight back, Callum said simply. Not with weapons alone, though we built those too from scraps of this ship and whatever metal we could find. We learned the patterns of the predators here, their hunting habits, Their weaknesses. There's a creature here, Mara added, that the survey probes labeled a level 9 threat, long before we arrived. We call it a Ravok, nearly the size of this chamber, teeth as long as a grown man's arm. It nearly wiped out our first settlement. How did you deal with it? Naya asked, wide-eyed. Mara's eyes glinted with something like grim pride. We learned that it hunts by sound, not sight. So we learned to move in silence. We built traps using the very technology from this ship. Technology the Ravok's ancestors had never encountered before. It took years and many lives, but eventually we turned the ship's own defenses against the planet's greatest predator. Driss's eyes went wide. You beat a level 9 threat. With scavenged alien technology. We had no other choice, Mara said simply. This world does not forgive weakness, so we stopped being weak. The conversation continued for what felt like hours, though time seemed to move strangely in the dim light of the ancient ship. The alien scouts listened, fascinated, and increasingly humbled, as Callum and Mara described decades of survival, battles against storms that could level entire settlements, poisonous plants that took years to properly identify and avoid, and predators that evolved and adapted just as quickly as the humans did. Naya's scanner recorded everything, her scientific mind working overtime to process the sheer amount of information. This was not just a survival story. This was a masterclass in adaptation, resilience, and stubborn, relentless human determination. Your people, Naya finally said, you have accomplished something no other species has managed in recorded history. Survival on a Class 15 world for generations. Mara's expression grew serious. We did not do it because we wanted glory or recognition. We did it because we had children to protect, families to keep alive. Survival was not a choice. It was the only path forward. As the conversation began to wind down, Vec checked the time on his wrist display, his expression tightening. Captain, he said into his comms, we've been on the surface for nearly 90 minutes. We're approaching our time limit. Soren's voice crackled back immediately. Understood. Wrap up what you can. I want you back at the lander within the next 20 minutes. Naya turned back to Mara and Callum, her expression apologetic. We have limited time on the surface, but I believe our discovery here, your survival, this ship, everything you've shared with us, this changes everything we understand about this planet and about what is truly possible. Mara studied the young science officer carefully. What happens now? Will your people try to remove us? Study us like specimens? Or will you simply leave and pretend you never found us? The question hung heavy in the air. Naya glanced at Vec, unsure how to answer something so important. Vec stepped forward, his tone steady and honest. I cannot promise what our leadership will decide, but I can tell you this. What your people have done here, surviving against odds that destroyed every other attempt in galactic history, that is not something to be hidden or exploited. That is something worth respecting. Callum's eyes narrowed slightly, studying Vec's face for any sign of dishonesty. Whatever he saw seemed to satisfy him, at least for now. We have survived alone for a long time, Mara said quietly. We are not eager to trust outsiders easily, but perhaps it is time our story was heard beyond this jungle. As the scout team prepared to leave, gathering the last of their scanner data and saying careful goodbyes to Mara, Callum, and the watching community of survivors, Driss paused near the chamber's entrance, looking back at the strange makeshift home built inside an alien ship's bones. Naya, he said quietly, in all of history nobody has ever survived here. And they didn't just survive. They built a whole life, a whole society. Naya nodded slowly, her mind still racing with the implications. This changes everything we thought we knew about Class 15 worlds. About survival limits. About what's truly impossible. Vec, walking just ahead of them, glanced back at the fading chamber lights behind them. Command is not going to believe this report. As they made their way back through the dim corridors toward the exit, Callum walked with them in silence for a while, before speaking one final time. Tell your leaders this, he said. This world nearly destroyed us, many times over. But we did not just survive it. We learned it. We understood it, piece by piece, year by year, until it stopped being our enemy and started being home. He paused at the ship's exit, watching as the scout team prepared to return to their lander in the fading evening light. Perhaps that is something your people should understand as well, Callum said, before you decide what to do with what you found here. Back on the Varen, Captain Soren watched the final moments of live feed as her team boarded the lander and began their ascent back through the storm-filled skies. Her mind was already racing ahead, thinking about the report she would need to send to command, about the implications of what her small scout ship had just discovered. Humans, alive, thriving in their own difficult way, on a planet that had killed every other species that dared to attempt it. This was no longer just a survey mission. This was about to change everything the galaxy understood about humanity. And somewhere far beyond the reach of the Varen sensors, across the vast distances of unmapped space, word of this discovery would soon begin to spread. First through careful official channels, and then, as such things always did, far beyond anyone's control. The galaxy was about to learn a name it had barely heard before: human. And it was about to learn that this name meant something far more dangerous and far more remarkable than anyone had ever imagined. The lander shook hard as it climbed back through the storm clouds, lightning flashing on every side. Nobody spoke much during the ride. Naya sat quietly, her scanner still full of data, her mind still turning over everything she had just seen. Driss stared out the window, watching the jungle shrink below them. Vec kept his weapon ready, out of habit more than fear now. By the time the lander docked back with the Varen, the storm had faded into a distant rumble beneath the clouds. Captain Soren was waiting at the airlock the moment the hatch opened. Her face was tight, focused, the look of someone who had been thinking hard for the last 2 hours and had not stopped once. "Report," she said, before anyone had even fully stepped out of the lander. Naya pulled off her helmet, her hair damp with sweat. "Captain, what we found down there is unlike anything in galactic history. There is a human colony living inside that ship. 63 survivors, generations deep." Soren's eyes narrowed. "Generations? How long have they been there?" "Based on what they told us," Naya said, "at least several decades. Long enough to raise children, lose others, and build an entire society inside that wreck." Soren turned and began walking briskly toward the bridge, the team following close behind her. "Tell me everything, from the beginning." In the ship's briefing room, the team laid out everything they had learned: the crash of the Providence, the brutal early years, the deaths, the slow, hard-won survival, and the discovery of the ancient alien ship that had become their home. Soren listened without interrupting, her arms crossed, her expression unreadable. When Naya finished speaking, the room fell into a long silence. "Let me understand this correctly," Soren finally said. "A human colony ship crash-landed on a Class 15 death world. They lost more than half their people in the first 2 years alone. And yet, decades later, they are still alive. Not just alive, organized, building tools, defeating apex predators, surviving storms that would tear this very ship apart." "That is correct, Captain," Vec said. Soren shook her head slowly, something between disbelief and reluctant respect crossing her face. "In 300 years of galactic exploration, 9 other Class 15 worlds have been found. Every single expedition sent to study them died within days, some within hours. And these humans have lived there for generations," Naya added quietly. Soren sat down slowly at the head of the briefing table, processing the weight of what she was hearing. "This is not just a survival story. This is proof that everything we believed about Class 15 worlds, that they are truly unsurvivable, might be wrong." Naya pulled up her scanner data on the briefing room's main screen, showing images and readings from inside the ship. "Captain, there is more. The ship itself, the one the humans are living in, it is not of any known design. Its technology does not match any species in our registry." Soren studied the strange hull patterns on the screen. "An unknown species built this ship?" "It appears so," Naya said. And based on what the humans told us, the ship was already abandoned when they arrived. No bodies, no signs of struggle, just empty. Which means whoever built it either left willingly, Driss said, or something on this planet made them leave in a hurry. The room went quiet again as everyone considered that possibility. If an advanced species couldn't survive here long enough to keep their own ship running, Soren said slowly, and a group of stranded human colonists not only survived, but learned to use that same technology well enough to keep a signal broadcasting for years. She did not finish the sentence. She did not need to. Word of the discovery spread quickly through the Veyron's small crew, and within hours Soren had prepared a full report to send back to the alien home fleet's command center. She reviewed it one final time before transmission, her science officer standing quietly beside her. "Captain," Naya said, "before you send that, may I make a request?" Soren looked up. "Go ahead." "I would like permission to return to the surface, not just for a quick scan this time. I want to properly study how they survived, their tools, their methods, their understanding of the ship's technology. This is the most important discovery of my career, and possibly one of the most important discoveries in galactic history." Soren considered this for a long moment. "Command will likely want a full team down there soon regardless. But I want to be careful, Naya. We just found 63 vulnerable survivors on a hostile world. The last thing they need is a flood of strangers descending on their home before we understand the full picture." "I agree," Naya said. "That's exactly why I want to go back, carefully, respectfully, and start building real trust with them before anyone else arrives with less patience." Soren studied her for a moment, then nodded slowly. "Take Driss with you. Beck stays for security, but I want this next visit to feel less like an investigation and more like a conversation." The next morning, if such a term even applied in the endless storms of that world, Naya, Driss, and Vec returned to the surface. This time they carried gifts, basic medical supplies, some preserved food samples, and a portable device that could help translate any remaining pieces of the ancient ship's unknown language. Mara met them near the ship's entrance, her expression cautious but slightly less guarded than the day before. "You came back," she said, a note of quiet surprise in her voice. "We told you we would," Naya said, offering a small case of medical supplies. "These are basic healing tools. Antibiotics, wound treatments, things that might help, especially for the children." Mara studied the case for a long moment before accepting it. "Thank you. We have had to make do with what little we understood of plant medicine here. Some of it works. Much of it we learned through painful trial and error." "I would like to understand how you did all of this," Naya said. "Not just to study it, but to genuinely learn from what your people have accomplished. If you're willing to share." Mara considered this, then nodded slowly. "Come. Let me show you our world." Over the following hours, Mara led the team through the human settlement, showing them the systems and knowledge they had built over decades of survival. They saw the water filtration system, built using scavenged alien technology combined with simple layered stone and cloth filters, designed to remove the toxic spores that filled the planet's rainfall. They saw the early warning systems, simple but effective devices that used vibrations in the ground to detect approaching predators long before they got close. "The storms took us the longest to understand," Mara explained, leading them to a reinforced section of the ship's outer wall, strengthened with layers of packed earth, stone, and salvaged metal. "In the first year, we lost an entire shelter to a single storm. After that, we studied the storm patterns for months. We learned they follow certain paths, influenced by the mountain ranges to the north. Now, we know almost exactly when and where the worst storms will strike." Driss, fascinated, ran his scanner over the reinforced wall structure. "This is remarkably advanced engineering, especially considering your limited resources." "Necessity," Mara said simply. "When failure means death, you learn quickly, and you remember everything." They continued the tour, moving to an area where several humans were working with strange plants, carefully cutting and preparing them at long wooden tables. "This is our food production area," Mara explained. "Much of the plant life here is toxic if eaten raw. It took years of careful testing and many losses before we understood which plants could be safely prepared and how. An older woman working at one of the tables looked up as they approached. Her hands were stained green from years of handling the local plants. "This is Elin," Mara said. "She oversees our food preparation. She has saved more lives with her knowledge than any of our weapons ever have." Elin nodded politely to the visitors before returning to her work, carefully removing the toxic outer layer of a strange spiked fruit. "Some of these plants," Elin said without looking up, "can kill a grown man within minutes if prepared wrong. Others can heal wounds faster than anything from the old ship's medical stores, once we understood how to use them properly." Naya watched, fascinated. "Your people have essentially developed an entirely new field of botanical medicine, unique to this planet. We had no other choice," Elin said simply. As the tour continued, Naya noticed something important. Despite the harsh, unforgiving world around them, there was an undeniable sense of community and even quiet joy among the human survivors. Children ran between shelters, laughing despite the ever-present danger beyond the ship's walls. Groups of adults worked together on various tasks, talking, sometimes even joking, their bond clearly strengthened by decades of shared hardship. "Your people seem happy," Naya observed carefully. "Despite everything." Mara smiled faintly, watching a group of children playing a simple game near one of the fires. "Happiness is a choice, even here, especially here. We lost so much in the early years. If we let ourselves live only in grief and fear, this world would have finished the job long ago." "How did you keep hope alive?" Driss asked. "Generation after generation, on a planet that tried so hard to kill you?" Mara was quiet for a moment, considering the question carefully. "My grandmother was one of the original survivors of the crash. She used to tell us that hope was not about believing things would be easy. It was about choosing to keep building, keep trying, keep living, even when things were impossibly hard. That belief has carried through every generation since." Later, they reached a quieter section of the ship, where a group of teenagers were being taught by an older man, using simple tools to demonstrate basic mechanical principles on scavenged pieces of the ship's technology. "This is Torin," Mara introduced. "He leads our education efforts. Every generation we make sure our children understand not just how to survive, but how the technology around them works. Knowledge is the difference between surviving today and thriving tomorrow." Torin looked up from his lesson, studying the alien visitors with sharp, curious eyes. "You're the outsiders who found us." "We are," Naya confirmed. "We're hoping to learn from your people, if you're willing to share." Torin considered this for a moment, then gestured toward the mechanical components spread across the table in front of him. "We've spent decades learning to understand fragments of this ship's technology, piece by piece, without ever having proper instructions or guidance. If you have knowledge that could help us understand more, I imagine the exchange could go both ways." Naya smiled slightly. "I would like that very much." As the day continued, the alien scout team learned more about the incredible depth of what the human survivors had built, a small but resilient society, complete with education, medicine, defense, food production, and even simple forms of governance, led by Mara and a small council of respected elders. But as evening approached, and the ever-present storms began building once again in the distant sky, Mara's expression grew more serious. "There is something else you should understand," she said, leading Naya, Driss, and Vec to a quiet corner of the ship, away from the busier common areas. "What is it?" Naya asked. Mara hesitated, choosing her words carefully. "The predator we told you about before, the Ravok. We have not seen one in nearly 3 years. That is unusual. This world does not go quiet without reason." Vec's expression sharpened immediately, his earlier caution returning. "You think something changed?" "I fear something has," Mara admitted. "The jungle has been unusually quiet in recent months. Fewer predator sightings, fewer storms even, though that could simply be natural cycles. But my people have learned over the years that when this world grows quiet, it is rarely a good sign. Naya frowned, glancing at her scanner. Could this be related to our arrival? Our ships entering the system? Perhaps, Mara said. Or perhaps something else is happening, something we do not yet understand. This world has always kept its deepest secrets well hidden. The mention of unknown dangers cast a heavier mood over the remainder of their visit. As the scout team prepared to return to their lander before the coming storm made travel too dangerous, Mara walked with them one final time toward the ship's exit. Your people are remarkable, Naya said sincerely. What you have built here, against such incredible odds, it is unlike anything recorded in galactic history. We did not build it for history, Mara said. We built it to survive, to give our children a chance at a future even here. I would like to return again soon, Naya said. With your permission, of course. There is still so much to learn, and I believe we could help each other, especially if something dangerous truly is changing on this planet. Mara studied her carefully, then extended a weathered hand. Then let us build that trust properly. Slowly, carefully, as equals, not as strangers passing through. Naya shook her hand firmly. Equals. I can agree to that. As the lander lifted off once more, carrying the scout team back toward the Varian through the gathering storm clouds, Naya reviewed her extensive notes and scanner data, her mind racing with the implications of everything she had witnessed. Captain will want to see all of this immediately, Driss said, watching the data scroll across Naya's screen. She will, Naya agreed. But there's something else we need to report as well. Mara mentioned the local apex predators have gone strangely quiet over the last few years. That kind of change on a world like this, it could mean something significant is happening. Vec, seated near the lander's controls, glanced back at them, his expression thoughtful. A world that has never changed in 300 years of recorded history, suddenly changing shortly after we arrive. That feels like more than simple coincidence. Nobody had an answer to that yet. But as the lander broke through the storm clouds and the Varian came back into view against the stars, each of them silently understood one thing clearly. Whatever was happening on that Class 15 death world, humanity's survival there was only the beginning of a much larger story, one that was about to reach far beyond this single storm-covered planet. Back in orbit, Soren listened carefully to the full report from her returning team, her expression growing more serious with every detail. When Naya finished, the captain remained silent for a long moment, staring out at the distant cloud-covered world below them. Send the full report to command, she finally said. Everything. The survivors, the ship, the changes in wildlife behavior. All of it. Understood, Captain, Naya said. Soren turned back to the window, watching the storms roll silently across the planet's surface far below. Something tells me, she said quietly, almost to herself, that this is only the beginning of something much bigger than any of us realized. Far above the storm-covered world, unseen and unheard, the vast distances of space carried Soren's report outward, toward the alien home fleet, toward command centers light years away, and eventually, toward a much wider galaxy that was about to learn, for the first time in recorded history, exactly what humanity was truly capable of. Far from the storm-covered jungles of the death world, across a distance that light itself needed weeks to cross, a message arrived at the central command station of the Ilvex Compact, the alliance of species that had sent the Varian on its quiet survey mission. The message was marked urgent. Priority 1. For the eyes of the High Council only. An officer named Trask, a mid-level communications analyst, was the first to open it. He was not supposed to read Priority 1 messages before the Council did. But something about the file size and the strange subject line, Class 15 World, Confirmed Survivors, made his hands move before his training could stop them. He read the first paragraph. Then he read it again, certain he had made a mistake. He had not made a mistake. Trask stood up so fast his chair rolled backward and hit the wall behind him. Without a word, he ran down the corridor toward the council chamber, the report clutched tightly in his hand. The High Council of the Ilvex Compact was made up of representatives from 11 different species, all seated around a large circular table in a chamber built specifically for calm, careful, measured discussion. Nothing about the next hour would be calm. Trask burst through the chamber doors, breaking every rule of formal procedure, and slammed the report down in front of Counselor Yeshar, the eldest and most respected member of the council. "Forgive me," Trask said, breathless, "but you need to read this. Now." Yeshar, an old and patient being with 4 eyes and a calm, deliberate manner of speaking, raised one eye ridge at the interruption but said nothing. She picked up the report and began to read. The chamber fell silent as her eyes moved across the page. Slowly, her expression shifted. First confusion, then disbelief, then something the other council members had rarely seen on her face in decades of service. Fear. "Counselor," said another member, a sharp-voiced representative named Doss. "What does it say?" Yeshar set the report down slowly. "It says," she said, her voice carefully controlled, "that the Varen has discovered a human colony, alive and thriving, on the newly located Class 15 world." The chamber erupted. Voices rose from every direction, overlapping, arguing, demanding clarification all at once. Doss stood up sharply. "That is impossible. No species has ever survived a Class 15 world. 9 confirmed deaths. Every single expedition, without exception." "The report is detailed," Yeshar said, raising a hand for silence. "Scanner data, visual confirmation, direct communication with the survivors themselves. This is not a rumor. This is confirmed." A representative from the reptilian Skarn species, a cautious and defensive people by nature, slammed a clawed hand on the table. "If this is true, it changes everything we understand about survival limits. It changes everything we understand about humans." "It is more than that," said another voice, quieter but firm. This belonged to Counselor Wren, a scientist by training before entering politics. "This proves that our danger classification system itself may be flawed. If humans without proper equipment, without preparation, stranded by accident, could survive there for generations, what does that say about our own capabilities? Our own assumptions about the galaxy's limits?" The room fell into an uneasy silence as that question settled over everyone present. Doss, still visibly shaken, was the first to speak again. "We need to consider the threat here. If a stranded group of survivors, without military training, without proper weapons, can defeat apex predators and survive storms capable of destroying starships, imagine what a prepared human military force could accomplish on such a world. Imagine what they could accomplish anywhere." "You are jumping to conclusions," Wren said sharply. "These are survivors, not soldiers. Desperate people adapting to stay alive. That is not the same as a military threat." "Is it not?" Doss argued. "Humans have a documented history of adaptability that outpaces most known species. We have already seen this in their conflicts with other powers, decades ago. Reports from that era described human forces as unpredictable, resourceful, and disturbingly difficult to defeat, even against superior numbers and technology." Yeshar raised her hand again, calling for order. "This council will not make hasty judgments based on fear alone. We have limited information. Before we decide anything, we need a complete, careful assessment of the situation." Across the chamber, a quieter voice finally spoke, one that had remained silent throughout the heated exchange. This was Counselor Inez, representative of a small, historically neutral species known for careful diplomacy and cautious curiosity. "May I offer a different perspective?" Inez asked. Yeshar nodded. "Please." "We are allowing fear to dominate this conversation," Inez said calmly. "But consider what this discovery truly represents. For 300 years, we have accepted Class 15 worlds as absolute unconquerable barriers, places where nothing can survive. This discovery challenges that entire belief." "That is precisely the concern," Doss interrupted. "Or," Inez continued unbothered, "it is an opportunity. If humans can survive there, perhaps there is knowledge to be gained, not just about humans, but about survival itself, about adaptation, about resilience that could benefit every species in this compact, not threaten them." The chamber grew quiet again, considering this new angle. "There is also the matter of the ship itself," Wren added. an unknown, highly advanced vessel, abandoned on that world long before the humans arrived. If an entirely unfamiliar species could not maintain a presence there, yet stranded humans not only survived, but learned to operate remnants of that same advanced technology. This raises questions far beyond human capability alone. The debate continued for hours, voices rising and falling as the council members argued over the proper response. Some pushed for immediate, cautious observation only. Others insisted on a stronger, more decisive presence, fearing that leaving humans unmonitored on a world with such advanced unknown technology could pose unpredictable risks. Finally, Yeshar called for a temporary pause in the discussion, silencing the chamber with a firm, practiced authority. This council will not decide humanity's fate or this planet's future through fear-driven argument alone, she said. I propose the following. A larger delegation will be sent to the Class 15 world under strict, careful protocols. Their mission will be threefold. First, to properly assess the human survivors and their capabilities. Second, to investigate the unknown vessel and its origins. Third, and most importantly, to determine whether this changes our understanding of Class 15 worlds as a whole. And if the humans are found to be dangerous, Doss asked pointedly. Yeshar's expression grew serious. Then this council will make that decision carefully, with full information, not through panic in this chamber today. The vote was called. After several more minutes of tense debate, the council approved Yeshar's proposal, though not unanimously. Doss, along with two other cautious council members, voted against sending the larger delegation, favoring stricter quarantine measures instead, but the majority prevailed. A larger, more thorough mission would be sent. Meanwhile, far beyond the council chamber, word of the discovery had already begun to spread through less official channels. Communication officers, scientists, and military analysts across the Ilvex Compact's various worlds began receiving fragments of the report, some accurate, many distorted through repeated retelling. In scientific circles, the news sparked immediate fascination. Researchers who had spent entire careers studying the galaxy's most extreme environments found themselves suddenly presented with the greatest natural experiment in recorded history. A species surviving unaided on a world previously considered entirely unsurvivable. In military circles, the reaction was far more cautious and in some cases, openly fearful. At a smaller, more private meeting held shortly after the council's decision, a group of senior military officers from several species gathered to discuss the implications privately, away from the wider political debate. If this report is accurate, said a Skarn general named Vros, we are looking at a species capable of turning humanity's greatest historical weakness, being stranded, undersupplied, outmatched by their environment, into an eventual strength. That is not a comforting thought. Humans have always been this way, replied another officer, a veteran named Kelthus who had fought against human forces decades earlier during a brief but bloody territorial conflict. I served against them in the Kessin border conflict. They lost early battles constantly. Poor equipment, limited numbers, and yet somehow, by the war's end, they had adapted faster than any of our tactical models predicted. You make them sound like a threat rather than survivors, Vros said. Kelthus's expression darkened slightly, memories clearly resurfacing. I make them sound exactly like what they are, a species that does not know how to accept defeat, even when defeat should be certain. This Deathworld story does not surprise me in the slightest. It confirms everything I already learned the hard way. Back on the Veyron, still in orbit above the storm-covered planet, Captain Soren received official word of the Council's decision through an encrypted priority channel. She gathered her senior crew in the briefing room to share the news. Command has approved a larger delegation, she announced. They will arrive within the next several days, bringing additional scientists, diplomats, and a small security detachment. Naya's expression shifted with concern. A security detachment? That could alarm the survivors. They've spent decades protecting themselves from threats. A larger armed presence might damage the trust we've worked to build. I raised the same concern to Command, Soren said. But the Council insisted on proper protocol. They are treating this as a first contact scenario of galactic importance, not simply a survey mission anymore. Vec crossed his arms, considering the situation carefully. If the wider compact is already debating whether humans represent a threat, arriving with a security force will only reinforce that fear on both sides. I know, Soren admitted. Which is why I want our team to remain closely involved in this next phase. We have already built a relationship with Mara and her people. I do not want that trust lost through poor handling by unfamiliar officials. Naya spoke up again, her tone thoughtful. Captain, there's something else we should consider. Mara mentioned that the local wildlife has grown unusually quiet in recent years, well before our arrival. If something on that planet is changing independent of us, it may be important context for whatever the delegation discovers. Soren nodded slowly. Include that in your full briefing to the incoming team. If something larger is happening on that world, we need every piece of information available before more people arrive. Driss, who had remained quiet through much of the discussion, finally spoke. Captain, if I may, this entire situation feels bigger than just humans, or predators, or advanced technology. That ship down there, the one the survivors are living in, its origin remains a complete mystery. Whoever built it clearly had the capability to construct something remarkable. But they were gone by the time the humans arrived. You think their disappearance is connected to whatever changes are happening on the planet now? Soren asked. I don't know, Driss admitted, but it feels like too large a coincidence to ignore. As the days passed while the larger delegation made its way toward the system, tension slowly built aboard the Virene. Naya used the time to continue building trust with Mara's people, making several more careful visits to the surface, always respecting boundaries, always listening more than instructing. During one such visit, Mara raised a concern of her own. Your captain mentioned more of your people will be arriving soon, Mara said, standing near the ship's entrance as evening storms gathered on the horizon. More strangers, with weapons, according to what you've told me. A security detachment, yes, Naya admitted honestly. I understand this might worry you and your people. Mara's eyes were sharp, calculating. We have survived this world through caution and preparation. Forgive me if a sudden increase in armed visitors does not inspire confidence. I will do everything I can to ensure this transition happens carefully, Naya promised. Your people's safety and your trust matter far more than simple procedure. Mara studied her for a long moment before nodding slowly. I believe you mean that, but belief and reality do not always align, especially where larger governments are involved. Back at Central Command, as the delegation prepared for departure, Counselor Yeshar remained alone in the empty chamber long after the others had left. Reviewing the original report one final time, she thought of the decades of careful galactic law, the long-standing belief that Class 15 worlds represented absolute, unbreakable limits of survival. She thought of Doss's fear and Inez's curiosity and the quiet, complicated truth sitting somewhere between them. Humanity had turned an impossible death sentence into a home. Whatever the compact decided to do next, Yeshar understood one thing with absolute certainty. The galaxy would never look at Class 15 worlds, or at humanity, the same way again. As the massive delegation fleet finally departed toward the storm-covered planet, carrying scientists eager to study an impossible survival story, diplomats hoping to build careful first contact, and soldiers quietly prepared for the possibility of an unpredictable and dangerous new player in galactic affairs, one truth remained clear to everyone involved, regardless of their differing opinions. Something had changed in the galaxy that day, and there would be no going back to the way things were before. The delegation fleet arrived on the 5th day, breaking through the outer marker of the system in a formation far larger and more imposing than the small Varen had ever been. 3 heavy cruisers, 2 science vessels, and a dozen smaller support ships spread out in careful orbit above the storm-covered planet. Mara watched the new lights appear in the night sky from the ship's exit, her expression unreadable. That is not a small scout ship, she said quietly to Naya, who stood beside her. No, Naya admitted. It is not. Aboard the lead cruiser, a tall, broad-shouldered officer named General Threx stood on the bridge, studying the planet below with sharp, calculating eyes. Threx had spent 30 years in the Ilvex military, and he did not trust reports that sounded too good or too strange to be true. "Captain Soren," he said as Soren's image appeared on the bridge's communication screen, "I have read your reports. Impressive work. But I will be conducting my own assessment before any final decisions are made." "Understood, General," Soren said carefully. "I would ask that you proceed with caution. These survivors have spent decades protecting themselves. A sudden show of force could damage the trust we've worked hard to build." Threx's expression remained neutral. "I appreciate your concern, Captain, but my priority is the safety of this delegation and a proper evaluation of any potential threat. That means my methods will be thorough." Soren's jaw tightened slightly, but she kept her voice professional. "Understood, General." The next morning, a larger group made its way down to the surface. Scientists eager to study the ancient ship's technology, diplomats hoping to open formal communication, and a full security detachment under Threx's direct command, armed and armored far beyond what Naya's small team had carried on their first visits. Mara met them at the entrance, flanked by Callum and several other senior members of her community, their expressions guarded and tense. Threx stepped forward first, his posture formal, almost rigid. "I am General Threx, representing the Ilvex Compact's military command. We have come to properly assess your situation and determine the appropriate next steps." Mara's eyes moved over the armed soldiers standing behind him, then back to his face. "Assess us for what, exactly?" "For your safety," Threx said, "and for ours." The words hung heavy in the humid air. Naya stepped forward quickly, trying to ease the growing tension. "General Mara and her people have already shown remarkable cooperation with our earlier visits. I believe a less formal approach might—" "Officer Naya," Threx interrupted, not unkindly, but firmly. "I understand your previous work here, but this situation now falls under my authority. I intend to conduct this properly." Naya glanced at Mara, an apology clear in her eyes. Mara's expression remained calm, though her hand rested lightly on Callum's arm, a silent signal between old friends who had faced far worse dangers together than a group of nervous alien officials. "Very well," Mara said evenly. "Assess us, General. But understand this. My people have survived storms, predators, and starvation that would have ended your soldiers within days. We are not afraid of your uniforms or your weapons." Threx studied her carefully, something shifting slightly behind his controlled expression. "Noted." Over the following days, the delegation conducted extensive tests and evaluations, some respectful and careful, others clumsy and tone-deaf in ways that frustrated Naya, who watched helplessly as military protocol occasionally overrode diplomatic sensitivity. Scientists studied the human survivors' tools, their medicine, their understanding of the ancient ship's technology. Diplomats held long, careful conversations with Mara and her council, discussing history, governance, and hopes for the future. And Threx's security team conducted their own evaluations, testing the survivors' physical capabilities, their combat knowledge, and their understanding of the planet's many dangers. It was during one of these tests that everything changed. On the third day of the delegation's presence, a routine perimeter patrol, led by a young alien officer named Ress, ventured slightly too far from the ship's protected area while mapping the surrounding jungle. The patrol consisted of 6 soldiers, all wearing heavy environmental armor, all confident in their advanced weapons and equipment. They had grown slightly complacent after 2 days without incident, unaware that the recent unusual quiet in the jungle, the same quiet Mara had warned Naya about weeks earlier, was about to end. The attack came without warning. A massive shape burst from the dense tree line, faster than anything the soldiers' sensors had predicted possible. It was not the Ravok Mara had described before, but something similar, perhaps a related species, drawn by the increased activity and noise around the settlement. The creature's first strike sent 2 soldiers flying, their heavy armor doing little to soften the impact. Alarms blared across the patrol's communication channels. "Contact, large predator, unknown classification," Ress shouted, opening fire with his weapon, the energy blasts doing minimal damage against the creature's thick hide. Back at the settlement, Callum was the first to hear the distant alarms through his own communication device, a simple but effective early warning system the humans had built using scavenged ship technology. "That's a distress signal," he said sharply, already moving toward the weapons rack near the ship's entrance. From the outsider's patrol, Mara's expression hardened immediately. "How far?" "Close. Too close to the old hunting grounds," Callum said grimly. "If that's what I think it is, their weapons won't be enough." Naya, standing nearby, felt her stomach drop. "What do you mean their weapons won't be enough?" "I mean," Callum said, grabbing a heavy spear and a coiled length of rope, "that energy weapons don't work well against a Grender's hide. We learned that lesson badly years ago." "A Grender?" Vec asked, immediately alert. "Cousin to the Ravok," Mara explained quickly. "Smaller but faster and far more aggressive when its territory is disturbed. If your soldiers wandered into old hunting grounds, they've made themselves a target." Without hesitation, Callum, Mara, and 4 other experienced hunters from the settlement began moving quickly toward the sound of the distant battle, weapons in hand. "Wait," Threx's voice came sharply over Vec's communicator, having heard the emergency alert as well. "I am scrambling additional security forces immediately." "Your forces won't reach them in time," Mara said firmly, not slowing her pace. "We know this jungle. We know this creature. If you want your soldiers alive, you will let us help." There was a tense pause over the comm line. Then, reluctantly, Threx's voice returned. "Go. I'm sending backup behind you." The scene they found in the jungle was chaos. 2 soldiers lay injured on the ground, their heavy armor cracked and dented. The remaining 4 fought desperately against the massive creature, their energy weapons flashing uselessly against its thick, scarred hide. The Grendor was enormous, easily 3 times the size of a grown human, covered in dark, leathery skin with rows of sharp teeth and claws capable of tearing through metal. "Fall back to the tree line," Callum shouted, already moving with practiced speed toward the fight. "Draw it toward the narrow gap between those rocks." Ress, bleeding from a shoulder wound but still fighting, hesitated only a moment before following the unfamiliar human's instructions. Trusting the confidence in Callum's voice more than his own uncertain training, the remaining soldiers retreated carefully, drawing the massive predator through a narrow gap between 2 large rock formations, exactly as Callum had directed. "Now!" Callum shouted, and the human hunters sprang into action. Working together with practiced, decades-honed coordination, they moved as a single unit. 2 hunters used long ropes, weighted with heavy stones, to entangle the creature's legs as it pushed through the narrow gap. Another used a modified spear, striking precisely at a weak point near the creature's neck that Mara had identified through years of careful study. The Grendor roared in pain and fury, thrashing wildly, but the narrow rock formation limited its movement, exactly as the humans had planned. "Aim for the same spot," Mara shouted to the alien soldiers, pointing toward the weak point on the creature's neck. "Your weapons will work there." Ress, understanding immediately, redirected his team's fire toward the precise location Mara indicated. This time, the energy blasts found their mark, striking through the thinner hide at the creature's most vulnerable point. With a final thunderous roar, the massive Grendor collapsed, finally defeated. The battle had lasted less than 3 minutes, but it felt far longer to everyone involved. As the dust settled, Ress stumbled toward Callum, breathing hard, his earlier confidence completely shattered and replaced with something closer to genuine awe. "You saved my team," he said, disbelief clear in his voice. "You knew exactly what to do." Callum wiped sweat from his brow, glancing at the fallen creature with the practiced calm of someone who had faced this exact danger many times before. "We've lost people to Grendors before. You learn quickly or you don't survive long enough to learn it all." Mara moved to check on the 2 injured soldiers, quickly applying pressure to their wounds with practiced efficiency. "These injuries need proper treatment soon. Broken ribs, likely internal bleeding. Get them back to your medical facilities immediately." Ress nodded quickly, calling for emergency evacuation through his communicator. his voice still shaking slightly from the adrenaline. When General Threx arrived minutes later with his backup security force, he found the scene already resolved. A massive predator defeated, his injured soldiers being carefully treated by the very survivors his mission had been sent to evaluate. He stood silently for a long moment, taking in the scene before him. The confident, controlled expression he usually wore had shifted into something far more complicated. "Report," he finally said, though his voice had lost some of its earlier sharp authority. Ress stepped forward immediately. "General, we were ambushed by a large predator. Our weapons were ineffective against its hide. If not for Callum and his people, my entire patrol would likely be dead." Threx turned to look at Callum and Mara, who stood quietly nearby, tending to the last of the wounded soldiers. "You risked your own lives to save my soldiers," Threx said slowly. "Soldiers from a compact that arrived here armed and cautious of your people." "Your soldiers were still people in danger," Mara said simply. That mattered more than politics. That evening, back within the settlement, Threx requested a private conversation with Mara, away from the wider delegation. Naya, present at Mara's request, watched carefully as the usually rigid general struggled to find the right words. "I came here prepared to evaluate a potential threat," Threx admitted honestly. "Command feared what your people might represent, should your survival skills be turned toward conflict rather than mere survival." "And now?" Mara asked evenly. Threx was quiet for a long moment. "Now, I have seen your people risk everything to save soldiers who arrived here with weapons pointed cautiously in your direction. That is not the behavior of a threat," General Threx thought silently to himself. "That is the behavior of—" He paused, searching for the right word. "Allies," Naya offered quietly. Threx looked at her, then back at Mara, finally nodding slowly. "Perhaps that is the correct word." Mara studied the general carefully, her expression softening slightly for the first time since the delegation's arrival. "My people have spent decades fighting simply to survive. We have little interest in wars beyond this world, but we understand loyalty, and we understand courage when we see it. Your soldiers showed both today, even in their fear, as did your people," Threx admitted. "I will be honest in my report to the council. What I witnessed today changes my assessment considerably." "And what will you tell them?" Mara asked. Threx considered the question seriously. That humanity's survival here was not luck or simple stubbornness as many assumed. It was skill, sacrifice, and community, built through genuine hardship. That is not something to fear. That is something worth genuine respect. As night fell over the settlement, storms once again gathering in the distant sky, Naya found herself standing beside Vec, watching the human survivors and alien soldiers interact with far less tension than before. Some of the younger soldiers had even begun asking Callum questions about jungle survival, clearly fascinated by skills far beyond anything their formal training had prepared them for. "This changes things, doesn't it?" Vec said quietly. "It does," Naya agreed. "Today, this stopped being simply a survey mission or even a diplomatic evaluation. Today, humans and our people fought side by side and trusted each other with their lives." Vec nodded slowly, watching the fires burn steadily against the encroaching darkness. "The galaxy is going to hear about this. All of it. The predator attack, the rescue, everything." "I know," Naya said, a small, hopeful smile crossing her face for the first time in days. "And for once, I believe that is exactly what needs to happen." Far above the planet, aboard the lead cruiser, General Threx began drafting his official report to the council, his earlier caution and suspicion now replaced with a far more complicated, respectful understanding of what humanity had truly built on that impossible world. He knew his words would carry weight, perhaps enough to shift the entire council's perspective. Humanity had not simply survived a Class 15 death world. They had mastered it, and in doing so, had proven themselves capable of something far more valuable than mere survival. They had proven themselves capable of genuine selfless courage, even toward strangers who had arrived with weapons and suspicion instead of trust. And that, Threx understood clearly now, was a lesson the wider galaxy desperately needed to learn. After the battle with the Grendor, something shifted within the settlement. The alien soldiers no longer walked with weapons raised. The scientists no longer treated the humans as strange specimens to study from a careful distance. And Mara, watching all of this unfold, finally decided it was time to share something she had kept hidden since the delegation first arrived. She found Naya near the ship's entrance, watching the evening storm build over the distant mountains. "There's something you should see," Mara said quietly. "Something we have never shown any outsider before." Naya turned, surprised by the seriousness in Mara's voice. "What is it?" "The truth about this ship," Mara said. "Why we truly stayed here, all these years, instead of continuing our search for rescue." Naya called Vec and Driss to join her, and together, they followed Mara deep into the ship, far past the areas they had explored before. The corridors here were darker, quieter, untouched by the daily life of the settlement above. They reached a large sealed door, its surface covered in the same strange, unreadable markings found throughout the vessel. Callum was already waiting there, a heavy old-fashioned key in his hand, clearly modified from scavenged ship parts. "Only a handful of us have ever come this far," Callum said, turning the key carefully in a hidden mechanism beside the door. "This room, we chose to protect. Not out of secrecy for its own sake, but because of what it represents." The door slid open slowly, revealing a large chamber bathed in soft, pulsing blue light. Inside, the chamber was unlike anything they had seen elsewhere in the ship. Rows of strange, crystalline structures lined the walls, glowing faintly with the same blue light. In the center of the room stood a large circular platform, covered in intricate carvings that seemed to tell a story, though the images were abstract and difficult to fully understand. "What is this place?" Naya asked, her scanner already active, recording every detail. "We believe it was some kind of memorial," Callum said, "or perhaps a historical record. We found this room during our second year here, sealed and untouched, unlike much of the rest of the ship." Driss moved closer to the carved platform, studying the images carefully. "These carvings, they tell a story. A ship much like this one and creatures fleeing something. Something enormous." Mara nodded slowly. "We believe the species that built this vessel did not choose to leave this planet. We believe they were forced to leave, running from something far more dangerous than storms or predators." The weight of this revelation settled heavily over the group. Naya's mind raced, connecting pieces of information from their earlier scans and observations. "You said the wildlife has grown unusually quiet in recent years," Naya said slowly. "Could that connect somehow to whatever drove the original builders away?" "We believe so," Callum said grimly, "though we do not fully understand what it means yet." Mara moved further into the chamber, gesturing toward a section of wall covered in more detailed carvings. "This is why we truly stayed here, beyond simple necessity. In our early years, we could have used the ship's remaining systems to send out a basic emergency beacon, requesting rescue. We debated it for months." "Why didn't you?" Vec asked. Mara's expression grew distant, remembering. "Our captain, the leader of our original colony ship, died during the crash landing. Leadership fell to a council of survivors, myself included, though I was young at the time. We argued for weeks about what to do next." She paused, gathering her thoughts carefully. "Some wanted to send the beacon immediately, hoping rescue would arrive before conditions grew worse. Others argued that revealing our location, and the location of this advanced abandoned ship, to unknown rescuers could bring danger far greater than the planet itself." "You feared exploitation," Naya said quietly, understanding beginning to dawn. "We feared many things," Mara admitted. "But more than that, as the years passed and we slowly began to understand this ship, this planet, and what it truly meant to survive here, something changed within our community. We stopped seeing ourselves as stranded victims waiting desperately for rescue. We began seeing ourselves as something else entirely. As survivors who had built something worth protecting." Callum finished quietly. Naya studied the ancient carvings more closely, her scientific curiosity intertwining with a growing emotional understanding of the story being told. This platform, these images, I believe they may be recording exactly what happened to the ship's original builders. Driss knelt beside the platform, running his scanner carefully over the deepest carvings. Captain, I'm picking up embedded data within the material itself. Some kind of preserved digital record, remarkably well protected despite the ship's age. Can you access it? Naya asked. Driss worked carefully for several minutes, adjusting his scanner's settings before a soft, pulsing light emerged from the platform center, projecting a faint, flickering image into the air above them. The image was blurred, damaged by time, but unmistakably clear in its core message. It showed several tall, slender figures, their forms unlike anything in the current galactic registry, fleeing toward what appeared to be an escape vessel, while behind them, a massive shadowy shape moved through the jungle darkness. What is that? Vec asked, his voice tight with tension as they watched the ancient recording play out. We don't fully know, Callum admitted. The recording is damaged, and whatever recorded this device did not survive long enough to properly explain what they were fleeing from. But whatever it was enough to make an advanced, clearly capable species abandon this entire vessel and this world, rather than risk facing it again. Naya felt a chill run through her despite the chamber's warm, dim lighting. If something drove away a species advanced enough to build this ship, and the local wildlife has grown unusually quiet in recent years, you think it might be returning? Driss finished quietly. Nobody answered immediately. The question hung heavy in the pulsing blue light of the ancient chamber. Mara finally broke the silence, her voice steady despite the weight of the conversation. We do not know for certain. It is possible the quiet simply reflects natural changes in predator populations, nothing more. But my people have learned, through hard experience, that this world rarely changes without deeper reason. This is exactly the kind of information the Council needs immediately, Naya said, already thinking ahead to the reports she would need to send. If there's a possibility of a greater unknown threat connected to this ship's history, which is precisely why we kept this chamber hidden for so long, Callum interrupted gently. We did not want to cause unnecessary panic, especially among outsiders who did not yet understand or trust us. But you're showing us now, Vec said. Because you have proven through your actions during the Grendor attack that your people are willing to stand beside us, not simply study us from a distance, Mara said. Trust, once earned, deserves honesty in return. As the group continued to study the ancient recording, Naya found herself reflecting on the deeper meaning behind everything Mara and Callum had shared. This was no longer simply a story of stranded survivors overcoming a hostile world through sheer stubbornness and skill. It was a story of a community choosing, deliberately and repeatedly, to build something meaningful out of tragedy, rather than remaining trapped by fear or grief. You could have left, Naya said quietly, almost to herself. Even after learning this ship's history, even after understanding the potential dangers still connected to it, your people chose to stay, to build a life here, rather than simply survive as prisoners waiting for rescue. Mara nodded slowly. Leaving was never truly an option, not once we understood how badly our ship had been damaged. But even if it had been possible, I believe we would have stayed regardless. Why? Driss asked, genuinely curious. Because somewhere between losing half our people in those first terrible years, and slowly learning to survive, then thrive, this world stopped being our prison, Mara said, her voice filled with quiet, hard-won conviction. It became something worth protecting, something worth calling home. Callum placed a weathered hand gently on the ancient carved platform, his expression thoughtful. My own parents died in the second year here, during one of the worst storms this world has ever produced. I was young, barely old enough to understand what death truly meant. But I remember Mara's grandmother telling me something important that day, something I have carried with me ever since. What did she say? Naya asked softly. She told me that grief and purpose are not opposites, Callum said, that we could honor those we lost, not by giving up, but by building something strong enough that their sacrifice meant something greater than simple, senseless tragedy. The chamber fell into a respectful silence, the weight of decades of hardship, loss, and hard-won resilience settling over everyone present. After several more minutes studying the ancient recording and the surrounding carvings, the group finally made their way back toward the main settlement, carrying with them not only crucial new information about the ship's mysterious history, but also a far deeper understanding of exactly what humanity had built and sacrificed to survive on this impossible world. As they walked, Naya activated her personal communicator, preparing to send an updated report to Captain Soren and General Threx, detailing the newly discovered chamber and its unsettling implications. "This changes the entire situation," she said quietly to Vec as they walked. "If there truly is some unknown threat connected to this ship's original builders, and if that threat may somehow be returning, then the humans' survival here becomes even more remarkable," Vec finished, "and potentially even more important to the wider galaxy." Triss, walking just behind them, spoke up thoughtfully. "It also means we need to understand exactly what we're truly dealing with, before assuming we fully understand this planet at all." That evening, as the reports were carefully compiled and prepared for transmission back to Central Command, Mara found Naya once more, standing quietly near the settlement's edge, watching the distant storms roll steadily across the mountains. "Thank you," Naya said sincerely, "for trusting us with something so important." Mara studied the young science officer carefully, a small, genuine smile crossing her weathered face for the first time since the delegation's arrival. "Trust must begin somewhere. I would rather it begin with honesty, especially considering what may lie ahead for both our peoples." "Do you believe it's truly returning?" Naya asked. "Whatever drove the original builders away?" Mara's expression grew serious once more. "I do not know for certain, but my people have learned through generations of hardship that hope and caution are not opposites either. We can hope for the best, while still preparing carefully for whatever challenges may come." As night fully settled over the storm-covered world, and the ancient ship's dim, pulsing lights continued their quiet vigil over the sleeping settlement, both human survivors and their alien visitors found themselves united by a deeper, more complicated understanding of exactly what this Class 15 death world truly represented. It was not merely a planet that humanity had somehow managed to survive. It was a place of genuine sacrifice, hard-won wisdom, and quiet, determined resilience, built painstakingly over generations, out of tragedy, loss, and an unyielding refusal to simply give up, even when survival seemed truly impossible. And now, as ancient mysteries began slowly resurfacing from the depths of a long-abandoned alien vessel, both species understood clearly that their combined future, whatever challenges it might bring, would need to be faced together, with the same hard-earned courage and trust that had already carried them through so much. Far above in the quiet darkness of space, Captain Soren received Naya's detailed report, her expression growing increasingly serious. As she read through the newly discovered chamber's unsettling implications, she looked up slowly, staring out at the storm-covered planet below, understanding clearly that whatever came next would shape not only humanity's future, but potentially the future of the entire galaxy as well. The report reached Central Command 3 days later, carrying far more weight than any single document in recent galactic history. General Threx's official assessment, combined with Naya's detailed findings from the hidden memorial chamber, painted a picture the Ilvex Compact had never before encountered. Counselor Yeshar read the full report alone in her private chambers, late into the night, long after the rest of the council had retired. When she finally finished, she sat quietly for a long time, staring at the final lines of Threx's assessment. The humans of this world did not simply survive. They earned this planet, through sacrifice, wisdom, and courage, that this council would do well to study, rather than fear. Whatever unknown threat may still exist here, I believe humanity's continued presence represents our greatest advantage in facing it, not a danger to be contained. Yeshar closed the report slowly, understanding that tomorrow's council session would be unlike any other in her long career. The chamber was fuller than usual the next morning. Word of the delegation's findings had spread quickly through official channels, and every council member, along with several senior military and scientific advisors, had gathered to hear the full report presented formally. General Threx himself, having returned briefly from the planet's surface, stood before the assembled council, his expression calm but serious. "Counselors," he began, "3 weeks ago, I arrived at that system prepared to evaluate a potential threat. I expected desperate survivors, perhaps dangerous ones, clinging to life through violence and fear." He paused, looking around the chamber slowly. "What I found instead was a community. Organized, skilled, and remarkably compassionate, even toward strangers who arrived armed and suspicious of their intentions." Threx described the Grendor attack in careful detail, watching as several council members leaned forward, listening intently. He spoke of Callum's calm leadership during the crisis, of Mara's medical knowledge saving his soldiers' lives, of an entire community that had chosen courage and sacrifice over fear, again and again for decades. "This is not a species that survived through luck," Threx said firmly. "This is a species that survived through discipline, community, and an unwillingness to abandon each other, even when abandoning hope would have been far easier." Doss, still visibly skeptical despite the report's compelling details, raised his hand. "General, I do not doubt the bravery you witnessed, but you also uncovered evidence of a far greater unknown threat, one that apparently drove away an advanced species entirely. Does this not concern you?" "It concerns me greatly," Threx admitted honestly. "But I believe humanity's survival instincts and their demonstrated willingness to face danger directly rather than flee from it make them invaluable partners in understanding and confronting whatever this threat may be, rather than obstacles to be feared or contained." Naya, present via live communication link from the Veyron, was called forward to present her own findings regarding the hidden memorial chamber and the ancient recording they had discovered. "The recording is damaged and incomplete," she explained carefully. "But it clearly shows the ship's original builders fleeing this planet, pursued by something significantly larger and more dangerous than any predator currently known to inhabit this world." "Do we know what this threat is?" Counselor Wren asked. "Not yet," Naya admitted, "but the timing raises serious questions. Local wildlife populations have grown unusually quiet over the past several years, according to the human survivors' own careful observations. This could indicate natural changes, or it could suggest something is changing in the deeper ecosystem, something the humans have not yet directly encountered, but which their historical knowledge of this ship suggests may eventually return." The chamber fell into a thoughtful, serious silence. Counselor Inez, who had earlier argued for viewing humanity's survival as an opportunity rather than a threat, finally spoke, her voice calm and measured. "I believe this council faces a clear choice today. We can continue viewing this discovery through fear, focusing only on potential dangers, both from humanity's capabilities and from this unknown historical threat." She paused, looking around the chamber deliberately. "Or we can recognize what has truly been discovered here, a species that transformed an impossible death sentence into a thriving home through courage, sacrifice, and genuine community. A species that, when tested directly, chose to protect strangers rather than exploit their vulnerability." "What do you propose?" Yashar asked. "I propose we offer humanity a formal partnership," Inez said. "Not exploitation, not quarantine, but genuine alliance. Access to compact resources, technology, and knowledge in exchange for their expertise and cooperation, particularly regarding this newly discovered threat." The debate continued for several more hours, considering every angle carefully. Doss remained cautious throughout, though even his objections grew notably softer as the discussion progressed, the weight of Threx's first-hand account and Naya's careful scientific analysis gradually shifting the council's collective perspective. Finally, as evening approached, Yashar called for a formal vote. "This council must decide," she said, addressing everyone present. "Do we recognize the human survivors of this Class 15 world as a threat to be contained, or as a species worthy of genuine partnership and respect?" The vote passed with a clear majority, though not without remaining reservations from Doss and a small handful of others. Humanity would be formally recognized, offered partnership rather than quarantine, and invited to become active participants in future galactic affairs, rather than remaining isolated, forgotten survivors on a forgotten world. Back on the planet's surface, Mara received word of the Council's decision through Naya, who had insisted on personally delivering the news rather than allowing it to arrive through impersonal official channels. They are offering a full partnership, Naya explained, standing once again at the familiar entrance to the ancient ship, storms gathering as always in the distant sky. Access to advanced medical technology, educational resources, even assistance repairing enough of this vessel to finally allow travel beyond this world, if your people choose that path. Mara listened carefully, her expression thoughtful. And if we choose to remain here instead? Then the Compact will respect that choice as well, Naya said, but they will also offer protection and cooperation in understanding and confronting whatever threat may still exist connected to this ship's history. Mara was quiet for a long moment, considering the weight of this decision, one that would shape her community's future for generations to come. My people did not survive here by chasing comfort or easy answers, she finally said. We survived by building strength through hardship, by facing danger directly, rather than running from it. What are you saying? Naya asked. I am saying, Mara said, a small determined smile crossing her weathered face, that my people will accept this partnership, not out of desperation, but out of mutual respect. We have much to offer this compact, beyond simple survival knowledge, and in return, we welcome the chance to finally understand fully what this world, and this ship's history, truly means, not just for us, but for the wider galaxy as well. Word of the Council's decision, and the remarkable story behind it, spread rapidly beyond official government channels, reaching news networks and public discourse across dozens of worlds within the Ilvex Compact and beyond. Species that had never previously encountered humans found themselves fascinated, and in many cases, quietly unsettled, by the story of an entire colony surviving generations on a world previously considered entirely unsurvivable. Military analysts across multiple governments began reconsidering old assumptions about humanity's capabilities, particularly regarding their historical reputation for stubborn resilience during past conflicts. If humans could turn a Class 15 death world into a thriving home, purely through skill, community, and sheer determination, what other supposedly impossible challenges might they eventually overcome as well? Scientists, meanwhile, saw an unprecedented opportunity, eager to study not only the incredible survival adaptations developed by Mara's community, but also the ancient, mysterious ship they called home, and the unsettling historical mystery still hidden within its depths. Weeks later, as initial partnership agreements were formally signed between representatives of Mara's community and the Ilvex Compact, a small ceremony was held within the ancient ship's largest chamber, now cleaned, restored, and filled with representatives from both humanity and the wider compact, for the first time in the vessel's long, mysterious history. General Threx stood beside Mara and Callum during the ceremony, his earlier caution completely transformed into genuine respect and quiet admiration. 3 months ago, Threx said, addressing the gathered crowd, I would never have believed a small group of stranded survivors could accomplish what your people have built here. Yet standing here today, among your community, I understand clearly that underestimating humanity's resilience was perhaps the greatest mistake this compact has made in recent memory. Mara stepped forward, addressing the gathered representatives with quiet, hard-earned confidence. We did not build this community for recognition or for partnership with a wider galaxy we never expected to encounter again. We built it because giving up was never truly an option for us. But we welcome this partnership, and we welcome the chance to finally face whatever challenges still lie ahead, together, rather than alone. As the ceremony concluded, Naya found herself standing quietly beside Captain Soren, watching representatives from multiple species mingling respectfully with the human survivors who had, until recently, been completely unknown to the wider galaxy. This is only the beginning, isn't it? Naya said quietly. Soren nodded slowly, her expression thoughtful. The Council has already approved funding for a proper research station here, studying both the human community's remarkable adaptations and the deeper mystery still hidden within this ship's ancient history. And the unknown threat? Naya asked, her earlier concerns still lingering. Being taken seriously, Soren confirmed. Additional resources are being allocated specifically to investigate exactly what drove this ship's original builders away, and whether that threat still exists somewhere on this world, waiting. That evening, as the ceremony's guests slowly departed and the ancient ship settled once more into relative quiet, Callum found Driss standing near the hidden memorial chamber, still fascinated by the ancient carvings and their unsettling historical implications. You still think about it, Callum observed, what might be out there waiting. Driss nodded slowly. This entire discovery began with a simple question. How could humans possibly survive here when nothing else ever had? But now, I find myself wondering something else entirely. What's that? Callum asked. If an advanced species fled this world entirely, rather than risk facing whatever pursued them, Driss said quietly, what does it mean that your people, without any advanced technology or preparation, have somehow managed to survive here for generations, seemingly undetected by whatever that ancient threat actually was? Callum considered this question carefully, staring out toward the distant storm-covered horizon. Perhaps we were simply fortunate. Or perhaps, he added, his voice growing thoughtful, there is still much about this world, and about ourselves, that we have yet to fully understand. Far above the planet, aboard the growing research station now beginning construction in orbit, Counselor Yeshar reviewed the latest updates from the planet's surface, her expression a careful mixture of cautious optimism and lingering concern. Humanity's survival story had already begun reshaping galactic perspectives, challenging long-held assumptions about danger, adaptability, and the true limits of what any species might accomplish when given no other choice but resilience. Yet the mystery surrounding the ancient ship's original builders, and whatever unknown threat had once driven them away, remained unresolved, a lingering shadow over an otherwise remarkable story of survival and hard-won partnership. Yeshar knew, with quiet certainty, that this story was far from finished. Back within the settlement, as night fully descended and familiar storms rolled steadily across the distant mountains, Mara stood once more near the ship's entrance, watching her community, now expanded with new alien allies and partners, continuing their daily routines with the same quiet resilience that had carried them through decades of hardship. Beside her, Naya watched thoughtfully as well, understanding clearly that despite the remarkable progress made, and the genuine partnership now beginning between their two peoples, the true test of humanity's resilience, and the mysteries still hidden within this ancient world, remained far from fully resolved. Whatever comes next, Mara said quietly, almost to herself, my people will face it as we always have, together, with courage, and without ever giving up. Naya nodded slowly, watching the storm clouds gather once more in the distance, carrying with them the same uncertain, dangerous beauty that had defined this world since humanity's very first, desperate day of survival here, generations ago. Together, Naya agreed quietly, whatever it takes. Far beyond the storm-covered planet, across the vast, endless distances of unexplored space, word of humanity's incredible survival story continued spreading rapidly, reaching ears and minds across dozens of worlds, forever changing how the wider galaxy understood not only humanity's true capabilities, but the very definition of what survival, courage, and resilience truly meant. And somewhere, deep within the shadowed, unexplored depths of that mysterious Class 15 death world, whatever ancient threat had once driven an advanced species to flee in fear remained patiently, silently waiting, watching, perhaps even now, beginning quietly to stir once more.